Welcome to the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast, where we hold important conversations with experts on family enterprises. Family businesses contribute to 90% of Africa's GDP. In addition to being wealth and employment generators, family enterprises are also unique in that they are owned or managed by families. The interplay between the family, ownership, and enterprise systems is what we talk about in the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast. I am your host, Wanjami Chuki, a family enterprise coach, consultant, and advisor, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's episode. Please share, subscribe to this channel, and to our website at www.bbold.co.ke and give us your feedback on what resonated the most with you. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Business of Family Conversations and Circles series podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about triangulation. Carol, triangulation. Well, first of all, let me introduce Carol and myself. So my name is Wanjami Chuki, and I'm the host of today's session. And I have here with me my dear colleague and family systems expert and coach, Carolyn Gaiduma. And we're going to be talking about triangulation. So Carol, triangulation to me is one of the most destructive forms of communication. It is something that I find is really prevalent in family systems, and it's also prevalent outside of family systems. Why, with all of the destruction that triangulation can cause, why do people still communicate that way?
First of all, anything that is dysfunctional in a family is normally a thing by the family to try and either override, overlook, or solve a dysfunction that's already happening. So in a dysfunctional family, there's an issue that is bringing about a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety in the family. So triangulation, one is where a relationship, people are having a relationship and they're going through a conflict, but they're not directing the communication to each other. They're directing the communication to each other via another person.
So that's the triangle.
Yes, it's a triangle. Or there's another person trying to solve these two people's conflict. Maybe without permission or with, just interference basically. So the reason why triangulation happens in families is there are three reasons why it happens. Number one, it happens when somebody is trying to diffuse tension. So I'm having a conflict with you, and then somebody somewhere is sensing the tension and they're like, I can't handle it, they come between.
To rescue.
The second reason is that there is a conflict that people are not able to handle, and so somebody wants to create another conflict to divert their attention from the main conflict. So it's like, I can't handle this, so let me start another fire because people may run to that fire and forget about this. The third reason is people want to enforce their sense of greatness. I'm great, I'm correct. So triangulation happens when I'm trying to prove that I'm right. So I tell this to the other person so that I can feel right instead of dealing with you directly.
Well, the thing is, that kind of communication is so destructive because let's take the last example that you've given. Somebody is trying to prove that they're right, and they go to somebody to convince them that they're right and take a side. Essentially, they're then going to take a side against that other person. This third party has nothing to do with this dynamic between these two people. And it creates the space for a lot of scapegoating. It creates the space for manipulation.
Yeah.
You know, the third party manipulating this person who's supposed to be wrong, and not allowing the two people to just deal with this conflict that they have.
Yeah.
In fact, there's the triangle, which has the abuser or the perpetrator, the victim, and the rescuer.
Yeah.
That triangle, which is why this is called triangulation, creates these roles that don't actually allow people to address the people involved in the issue to address that issue.
Yeah, it becomes such a difficult thing to solve the conflict. And most of the time, the power is also a power dynamic also. And the rescuer begins to have so much power over these two.
Right.
Because they are the ones who seem to have the power to end the conflict, because they have information from here, they have information from here. So there's a sense of everyone is at their mercy because they can't talk.
Yeah.
These two people can't communicate. So for it to end, people have to have the courage to break this thing, this barrier that prevents them from communicating directly, so that they can, first of all, understand what is the conflict.
Well, when you talk about this in families, what if the third person is a child?
Yeah.
So that you've got two parents who maybe aren't getting along very well, and they can bring in the child and communicate through the child. As long as the child is present, they communicate with each other. Yet the tension still exists.
Yeah.
How is this child supposed to even deal with this, you know?
Yeah, they really can't. It's really very heavy on the child. It's such a huge responsibility, if I may call it that, for a child to be involved in an adult's conflict, especially, not even just a relationship, conflict.
Yeah.
And it affects and impacts the child in very negative ways. Because number one, the child gets lost in it.
Yeah.
All their focus now is about this conflict. And remember, it's about their survival. They're thinking about, they're doing it because they're like, if this falls apart, then I won't have a home, I won't survive, I'll die. This is why they are in it, and that's why they are so invested in it. It's a life and death situation for them.
Yeah.
So those emotions involved in managing that can overpower the child. And you find that in most cases, this is a child that becomes the addict.
Right. But even this whole thing of having to take sides in a situation like that, where say one parent is telling the child that I am right and the other parent is wrong.
Yeah.
And the conflict that the child has to go through in appeasing both parents.
Yeah.
It really is it's such a terrible situation, and this happens a lot.
It happens a lot, and I've seen a narrative going around about how what mothers have done with their children that causes the children not to have a relationship with their fathers later in life.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
The mother makes their child a confidant and tells them about their father.
Yes.
So the child never has a relationship with their father, they have a relationship with their father via their mom.
Right.
And so that dynamic creates another layer of, I lost my dad.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't have my dad because all I know about him is what mom used to tell me, and it was negative stuff. And then there's this dynamic of, again, the confusion of, behind the scenes you tell me this about my dad, but then when we are in the front facing, you're telling me to respect your dad, you're telling me, it's like the child becomes confused, and it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think also just along those similar lines, when you're dealing with a family, and say, this is a family that has more than one child. In our first episode, we talked about this scapegoating. The child that is blamed for the anxiety and whatever's stemmed from that. Triangulation can really be dangerous in that other children can also be roped into this triangle to be told that is the problem. And again, because the communication is coming from one of the parents, they will believe it. As in without evidence. I mean, scapegoated children, typically there is no evidence because they're not in the wrong. Later in life, what does that then set up? All the parties involved in this process, what does it set them up for?
Children are like, it's like it's like you're setting up a building. And the child is the stage of the foundation and the superstructure of the building. So the way you set it up, it will be like that. Like no matter how many aesthetics you put, you partition it, you repaint it, the structure there's a way you can't change the structure of that house. It's the same, the childhood is that. So every child in this dynamic, whether they're the scapegoat or the one that was roped in, have a certain set of emotions that they experience as a result of being in this dynamic. Now, because we are doing this subconsciously, we are not being organized like in a play, stand here. It's very subconscious. So you get used to that and you become used to it as your state of being. So that becomes your subconscious identity. So as a scapegoat, you learn to be defensive because you're always trying, like, I want you guys, I'm not wrong, you guys, that set of emotions?
Proving yourself.
Exactly. So that becomes you. So you move from the home into relationships, into the workplace, everywhere, as a scapegoat. It's creating and finding situations subconsciously to defend yourself from something. The ones who are in this triangle, in this dynamic, all are coming in from a certain perspective. So there's one who has been told to be in charge of him, maybe, like, watch that person so that they don't mess us up. So they are also coming in with a certain set of emotion because as a child, probably that's such a huge responsibility for them. Probably they have anxiety because they can't control you, yet they have been told to be in charge of you. So they live their life with that set of emotions and they carry it into their adulthood. So
in their relationships, they will basically behave in the same way.
They're on the lookout for bad behavior. They are feeling out of control. So they recreate. Actually, we are all recreating our childhood.
It's interesting because if in the case where the rescuer has been told to watch over that one, and it's really dangerous with siblings because that watching over that one can be it manifests as control. You are then given permission to control this person. So you see all sorts of things. Sibling abuse, which is a very unspoken dynamic in our society. People talk about domestic abuse as if it's only limited to spousal abuse. But sibling abuse is a whole other thing. And it's common.
Very common.
So you will find violence towards siblings, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, just control, just the whole idea of trying to control someone else. How does the one who's being controlled stop it? That's a question. And then a thing that I found in the work that we do is that the youngest tend to be at the tail end of a lot of this. Because probably they're the most vulnerable inside of the family system. How How does the triangle get broken up?
Wow. First thing is, the reason why the triangle is there is because there's a communication barrier between the two people who are having a conflict, or who are the primary people in the relationship.
Yeah.
That communication barrier needs to be broken. And sometimes it's there because of a dynamic that has been set up. Because triangulation is also about control.
Yes.
It's about somebody wanting to feel in control and triangulates as a way to try and get that control. So the communication barrier needs to be broken. And it will depend on what is the dynamic between these two. Why is there a communication barrier in the first place? And it could be because of the roles that they're playing in the family setup.
Yeah.
And so to break any communication barrier, there needs to be a lot of awareness. Like, you need to be aware of what is your experience in this family, what is your experience internally, what's going on inside of you.
Yeah.
And we talked about anxiety earlier. If you can't deal with anxiety, you can't break triangulation. Because how do you face this person and have this conversation if you can't deal with anxiety?
Yeah.
The very first reason why you're not communicating directly is because there's some anxiety around it.
Yes.
Because of a story you're telling yourself about what will happen if I confront them, what will happen if I have this conversation. So that is really what needs to be broken. Something else I wanted to say before I forget. You mentioned about the siblings. I'm a firstborn. So I'm the sibling that was given control over the others. And a lot of the times we look at the story from the perspective of the ones that were controlled. We forget the ones that were controlling, what their experience was.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
My experience was actually the same. It's so interesting that it's actually a very similar experience. Because on one hand, I was controlling my siblings. On the other hand, I was feeling out of control completely. And I was acting out my sense of not feeling in control, projecting onto them. Because I've been told, take care of these people. I don't want to find them dirty. I don't want to find them, they haven't eaten, they must sleep. And then these small rascals over here, you can't control them.
Oh, they're not listening to your instructions.
Do you know how frustrating it is, and how you have to puff yourself up to the size of your parents so that they can actually listen to you? And do you know how much energy that takes? Because I almost had to embody my mom to get their attention and use heavy words and slap them, and because I'm their sibling, right?
But also, do you really know what you're doing? I mean, I'm thinking that as a child,
I'm fighting for my life. It's a survival thing.
Yeah.
Because if I don't do it, then it means something will happen to me. I'm not safe. I will not be accepted. I will not be approved of. It's a matter of life and death for me to do this, right? So even though it was abuse to them, it was a way of me almost staying alive. So we are suffering the same fate. It's just that we are on two different, and it's actually, I'm a victim as much as they are.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how when we do family constellations, this plays out.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, as you're telling me the story, there's a loyalty. Well, first you are in protecting yourself,
Yeah.
but you also have a loyalty to the person who's given you that responsibility to be in control of these rascals. And of course, inside of that, how that loyalty plays out, there's just the way you know how to, because nobody has coached you on taking care of these rascals. Nobody has, I mean, you don't even have the life experience. You're still a child.
Yeah, I'm a child myself. And it's like this huge responsibility that also means life and death And it's like overwhelming. It's like totally overwhelming. And you would be like, a lot of the times I would be like, I wish you would just behave. Like, just sit still, be there. Everyone will be fine. I won't have to do anything to you guys, and I won't have to feel, But also, they were kids. They need to play them. I remember one day just taking a broom and telling my brother, I'm going to kill you, and actually meaning it. Like, I'll never forget how my body was feeling. And I think I was 9 or 8.
Yeah.
And I was so serious, like I meant it. I was gonna kill him. So it's like you have these huge shoes to fit. You have not been equipped to fit in these shoes. And on top of that, it means to your brain, it means a lot about who you are.
Yeah.
How you perform this thing.
Well, in a way also, as a child, you've been abandoned as a child, in the sense that your needs now are secondary, if they're even there at all.
Exactly.
You now have a responsibility and a role, and that is to take care of the others.
Yeah.
And still, you need taking care of. It's almost as if, how does a child even express that?
Exactly.
You don't have the language.
Yeah.
So I never thought that, I never quite understood how at a cellular level this could really also affect the child that appears to be abusive, that they're actually just responding to a stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. And some of this is where the genesis of triangulation comes in, because if you look at the dynamics between siblings, then after that has happened, what dynamic are they going to have? Because you might have siblings who have a lot of tension between them because of this abandonment or these siblings being given this level of responsibility by parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so you find that there's a lot of tension between the siblings, let's say between me and brother, and we really can't see face to face. Yeah, so the tension between siblings can become so much because of all this dynamic, and that they can't now have a face to face, they can't see eye to eye. And since they have to address it somehow, then they use other people to try and communicate their displeasure or, to the other. And that can be a genesis of triangulation.
How amazing. When I think about this in the family enterprise setting, because family enterprise and succession issues typically start kicking in when the siblings come in, when the family business is being now transferred to the siblings. And when that healthy communication, direct communication, being able to resolve conflicts is just, the setup is such that people cannot talk to each other.
Yeah.
It manifests itself in these succession rows,
Yeah.
people taking what is meant for somebody else, keeping out heirs, beneficiaries, depriving them from dispossession and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because it's the same dynamic playing out later in life.
Yes. Yeah. And now that you've mentioned enterprise, think about it, that this family has this dysfunction. They haven't started to do the work. So they're not even aware that this is, because, by the way, triangulation is so subtle sometimes that you're just experiencing the discomfort and the angst of it, but you're not really seeing what's really going on.
Yeah.
You don't see it as triangulation.
Yeah.
You're just like, so and so told so and so and this one,
Yeah.
And imagine that is happening in the family and they have an enterprise, and now you bring in other people. You have employees, you have professionals, you have all this. It's going to be the dominant dynamic.
Exactly. In fact, what also happens is that some of these professionals, and I have a particular, I mean, we're going to do a whole episode on lawyers as well, because you also have professionals who take advantage of this kind of a dynamic that from the outside they can see, oh, here communication is really poor. They can see maybe the injustice that they've been called in to deal with, but they decide to take advantage of the situation because they can profit from it and prolong it. And this is part of what we do in our family enterprise program, is to get people to actually start having the communication, the conversations that they need to have, and deal with it. Equip them with the tools to actually deal with it, as opposed to thinking that, particularly professionals that are out to just profit. And you know, a lot of times you find lawyers or these wealth managers don't really care about bringing the family closer. In fact, they oftentimes you'll find that they will separate the families even more.
From the conflict, because there are more suits that will come, more work for them, more money for them, you know. So again, it's about, if you are in a dynamic that you feel you cannot address the other person, what you're saying is very important. It's very important to get over whatever hurdle you need to get over, so that you can learn how to have difficult conversations and solve conflict, because when you can't do that, you're very open to manipulation. Because triangulation is about somebody coming and creating space between a relationship you're having with someone else. And that person coming in between then has a lot of influence.
We were talking about this earlier, and I had a real aha moment, so I want to bring it up again. When you were saying how people who've grown up in families where triangulation is a normal way of communicating will then go out and create relationships where
There are three of them.
where there are three people in the relationship. So unconsciously.
Exactly. So you either will be the one who comes in third, so you find yourself within a relationship. It's like, I've seen a meme where people say, please avoid texting some people at night. You find yourself in another person's relationship. You know? So you jump in and you become the third party in a relationship. And because it's very subconscious, you're called in. So maybe somebody will call you in and tell you, you know, come, I need your advice, talk to this person, and suddenly you're there. You're the third person, having a lot of influence over how these two people are going to go forward from there. Or you find yourself attracting a third person in your relationship, whereby suddenly now the health and the sustenance of your relationship depends on somebody who's not in the relationship.
Oh, it's crazy.
It is.
And it happens a lot. I mean, I'm even thinking about people who have affairs and, you know, creating a dimension of three people in a relationship. Chances are that they have come from an environment in which triangulation is the normal, people getting involved in other people's business is completely normal.
Exactly. And especially the kind of affairs where this person coming in is determining whether this other one lasts, this relationship lasts. Because this is what it's about. It's the person getting so much power that they decide how you two relate. And that's really how powerful triangulation is.
Exactly. In fact, the experience of being inside of a triangular setting is that someone is trying to exert control over you. You know, if you're not the one who is creating the triangle, someone is trying to exert control over you, and it's highly manipulative.
and managing your experience with the other person.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm having a relationship with you. There is a third person who is telling me how this relationship is going.
Yes.
It's like I tell them, Wanja told me this, and then they interpret it in another way that is actually telling me that this is what's going on.
Yeah.
Like I don't have authority, even because, and that's why triangulation is a form of a mental abuse, because they are deciding the experience for me. Like this is what they meant when they tell you that you didn't know.
Yeah.
They actually mean this.
This is how they actually feel about you.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
the person being told this, first of all, because maybe your immediate response is to be offended or hurt or whatever, it creates an instant distance, so that you don't go and verify.
Exactly.
In fact, I have found, I do this. If someone comes and tells me something about somebody else, and this is somebody I care about, I will tell them, I'm going to go and ask them to confirm what you've just told me.
Yeah.
I don't let it stay. Because I find it, I can now see the manipulative nature of that kind of communication.
Yeah.
If this is what somebody really feels, why don't they come and tell me themselves?
Exactly. So it's like somebody is managing your experience. Somebody is telling you what to think. Somebody, and that's why it's mental manipulation. It's mental abuse, because I'm getting into your head.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to tell you that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. And the reason why you are allowing that me to influence you is because of the relationship I have with this other person.
Yeah.
So you tend to think that I know more than you do.
Yeah.
About this relationship that we are having.
So when we talk about with narcissism, flying monkeys, right?
Yeah.
In a narcissistic dynamic where essentially people go and recruit people to decide that you are a certain way.
Yeah.
That's also triangulation. Bringing in people who have no business at all in even thinking anything about a situation that you're going through because they're not part of it. Suddenly becoming authorities and influencers and...
Exactly, for the benefit of this one who has recruited them. So it's like the way you can have, you can hire a crowd to go and so that the media comes and you're seeing you have a huge crowd and so you're popular.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, and because of how they have wrapped you up, you do not have that conversation you just told me that this person is not qualified to have an opinion about this. You don't think like that.
Yeah.
You just see many people who are sharing the same thought about you.
Yeah.
And you begin to believe that that's who you are. And then they hit you.
Unless you're strong enough to know that
exactly.
you need to separate yourself from these people. And I think that's also a solution in triangulation where you say, I'm not going to interact with this person on this issue.
Yeah.
They've got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's mental boundaries.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? And when you have mental boundaries, these are my thoughts and this is what I stand for. And this is who has an opinion in my life about this. Because you can't have, even the most important people in your life can't have an opinion about everything in your life.
Yeah.
So you must have mental boundaries, and the work that we do again helps so that you can learn where your boundaries are porous and learn how to take back all your power.
So in an environment, because this is very typical of family environments, I think our culture also really encourages this, enmeshment.
Yes.
We were not allowed any boundary space. We are in family. It doesn't matter how much anxiety, dysfunction, abuse, whatever is going on inside of this system. We are a family, and so you don't have a right to any boundary space.
Yeah.
And I say this knowing that this is what happens in families. Family business is even more so because you're glued together by a business.
Yeah.
How do we How do we say no? Is it just as simple as saying no? Sorry, this is where you end. This is where I begin.
It's not as easy as saying no, because before you say no, you must begin to be very much in your space. Remember when we were growing up, especially when it comes to mental boundaries, we were taught none. In fact, sometimes we used to hear a lot being told, I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think. Or I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. So that's like somebody is telling you that the content of your mind is not, you're not in control of it.
Yeah.
And anyone can put anything in there.
Yeah.
And whoever has an authority over your life has also an authority over your mind.
Yeah.
So you must begin to go back and see in what ways has that been taken away from you.
Yes.
In what ways do you feel unsure about what you're thinking? In what ways are you mistrusting your own ideas, your own perspectives, especially? Like your perception, are you trusting what you're seeing is what you're seeing?
Exactly. It's a massive, it's such a fundamental and massive topic. I remember I worked on trust for a very long time, and finally coming into that space of I trust myself first and foremost.
Yeah.
Actually, I just trust myself, you know.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the subject, this sense of, you know, listening to what's in your own mind, your own heart, your own soul, your own knowing. When we look at self-differentiation.
Yeah.
So our next episode is going to be on self-differentiation and why it's so important to know yourself, find yourself. Then nobody can mess with you. You know,
Exactly.
you will not entertain some random person, third party, coming in to decide how a relationship should go. You know. Thank you for joining us in this episode on triangulation. This segues into our next conversation on self-differentiation. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, share this content with everybody that you think would benefit from it. And until the next time, in all that you do, don't forget to go out there and be